What follows is a small clip of yesterday's 1-hour class on Patreon, during which I discussed the Roe v. Wade situation at some length. I've added a few annotations and special effects in order to make it more interesting. Enjoy. This is the Roe v. Wade chart for the origin back in 1973. And you can see right away both that the chart makes sense in describing a law, which is what it is, as well as the contentiousness of it, the fact that it's something that on the one hand is strong, but on the other is definitely going to get challenged, as it has been. And so the rising sign is Pisces, very late in Pisces. So then you look at Jupiter and Neptune for the rulership of Pisces, and you see that Neptune is in the 10th sign and it's in Sagittarius. This is very descriptive of a law, because a law would fit in the 9th sign, or rather I should say in the 9th natural sign, which is Sagittarius. It's just that in this case, it happens to be located in the 10th, thereby giving it a lot of power and describing what the thing itself is. And then you can add to that Mars is in Sagittarius as well. So you've got 2 planets in the 10th, sign of government as well. But the main thing is that you're describing a law. But then you notice that in the natal chart for the origin of this law, Saturn opposes Mars. And right away, you get a sense that Saturn always tries to restrain and restrict and reduce. So immediately, the imagery is a law that is going to get restrained, reduced. And then you look at the Jupiter as the co-ruler of the ascendant. It's in Capricorn. Now, Capricorn for Jupiter is said to be the place of its detriment because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, the opposite sign. But I take that with a grain of salt. Jupiter is fine anywhere in the chart, especially depending on what kind of aspects it makes. And here Jupiter is the ruler of the ascendant and the ruler of the 10th. So it's a very strong planet. It's also in the sign of government and in the 11th sign, which, if anything, strengthens it further, because the 11th is a sign that tends to improve with time. It grows in power as something ages. And Capricorn doubles down on that theme because that's also the way Capricorn works. It gets better with age. So I would not look at this Jupiter as being weak at all. And if I want to find trouble with it, I'd say, well, it squares Uranus. That's a problem. It gets challenged, but it is trine the moon, which makes it quite a nice planet. So all of that is quite positive for this law. Then we see, the contentiousness, the fact that it's in a kind of constant dynamic state. Oh, the Saturn opposite Mars and then square the moon. So this is a perpetual dynamism of sorts, and the Uranus square to Jupiter as well. However, you then see that Pluto at the time of the origin of the law trines the Sun, and the Sun is in Aquarius in the 12th, which is one of the key health houses. Pluto in Libra connects it to the feminine gender, and to my mind, this is a very good aspect to have Pluto trining the Sun in this way, enshrining something that is going to work for women through the trine. So now you see present day transits. This is where the planets are today. And as this Supreme Court leak happened, although of course we have to keep in mind that the supposed deliberations happened earlier and the actual release of the law or the judgment is said to come later, which would take us into June, July. But nevertheless, we're in the region, especially for the outer planets. And key here would be to notice that Pluto is transiting right over Mercury, and Jupiter is really close to the ascendant. So of those two, you would normally look at Pluto as being more threatening in the sense that Pluto can bring about upheaval and reconstruction and even destruction in order to recreate. But you always have to remember Pluto being a planet that is trine the sun at birth is much more likely than not to bring about, let's call them helpful reconstructions rather than catastrophic reconstruction. That's definitely something pointing to this Pluto over Mercury being less scary. Now, of course, Mercury rules the sign where Saturn is, and it's like they're chipping away. The way Roe has gone is constant reductions to the total freedom for women to do as they like. They started to bring in the number of weeks where you're allowed to do it and so forth. So now looking at this, you would be tempted to say, well, since Pluto is favorable, goes over Mercury, there's less to worry about. Also, Jupiter's on the ascendant, which is quite good. Based on this type of scenario with the planets, you would almost think that there is a decent possibility that despite the leak having occurred and the general sense now that that's it, they're going to bring the law down. I'm not totally sure about that, because based on where these planets are, it's entirely possible that the leak will have the effect, or maybe not have the effect, but rather that perhaps it's premature to say outright, this is what they're going to do. I would definitely consider the possibility that they might actually come out with something less catastrophic, but probably still restrictive in some way. In other words, I'd be amazed if, having signaled strongly when they were doing that Missouri case that they were going to go along with new restrictions, that now all of a sudden they're going to leave it exactly as is, but possibly a lot less than what people are expecting. That's definitely one outcome based on these present day transits that I would point to.